Hey everyone, Brayden here, coming to you with finally a breaking Disney news update. People have been saying, Brayden, where are you? I've been right here working on some big projects of my own. We recently released the Bright Line documentary, several epic universe updates, stuff where there's actual stuff to talk about, stuff happening. On the Disney front, there's been virtually nothing of significance news-wise that's happened the entire summer. Over at Walt Disney World, there's only a handful of projects even happening right now, most of which are just Disney making their hotels look like many hotels that you can find outside of Disney. They also installed Princess Water Tower over at Splash Mountain as they continue work on that update. Epcot's crater is slowly getting filled in with what is mostly just a bunch of pathways and planters, making you wonder why it was blocked off for 4 whole years. Disney forcing guests, every single guest that came through their gates for 4 years, to walk all the way around the center of the park for what looks like they could have just sectioned off little sections over time, done little refurbishments. It didn't seem like it was necessary to block off that full area, given it seems like most of it's just being filled in with pathway and planters. But today we finally got something of significance, an interview on CNBC with Disney CEO Bob Iger, who, surprise, surprise, for a 6th time is extending his tenure, hence me giving him the title of Disney Emperor in the title of this video. Between 2013 and 2017, Bob Iger extended his tenure 4 times. He finally stepped down in 2020, telling the New York Times that this time he was serious. He was 100% out. Despite that, he remained in charge of the board at Disney as chairman throughout 2021. Through much of the turmoil Chapek got the blame for, Iger then spent 9 months allegedly in retirement, but still had some sort of involvement at Disney, according to other executives. And then, as Disney stock experienced a large drop, there was that dramatic moment in the latter part of 2022 where Chapek was out and Iger was back in. Iger was given 2 years to right the ship. He said that he could do it, but that plan was quickly abandoned, and now Emperor Iger is signed on through 2026. Watch this.
We sat down in February, you'd been back a couple of months, and I did ask you if 2 years was too short a time. And you said, quote, you can get things done very quickly. Did something change in your calculation of how quickly you can get things done?
Well, we've gotten a lot done very quickly. Significant cost reductions, a complete realignment of the company in terms of its structure, some major changes in terms of personnel. And while a lot of work has been accomplished in the 7 or so months that I've been back, the board believed, and I agreed with them, that there was a lot more work to do. And the timetable that we had initially established, which was 2 years, seemed like it was putting undue pressure on us, even though we're getting at the work really quickly.
A warning sign that this was likely to happen came months back when the woman who allegedly ousted Chapek, CFO Christine McCarthy, stepped down herself. Now, there may have been extenuating circumstances with that, but oftentimes when someone in a position that high up, where they are potentially the heir apparent, steps down, it is an indication that there is no opportunity for advancement for that executive, meaning that the current chief executive has no intention of leaving and that the board intends to extend their contract. This happened with previous CFO Tom Staggs back in 2016, who would have made a great CEO, I think, especially for us Parks fans, as he was very bullish on Imagineering and even had some creative contributions of his own with the successful parks expansions of the 2010s. But Iger decided for the 4th time that he was going to extend his contract. Staggs was pushed out, and now here we are 7 years later, still with no heir apparent. Nobody even in training. And you may be saying, Brayden, you don't know that for sure. You don't know that the board hasn't already found a new CEO. Well, extending Iger's term through 2026 is a strong indication that they don't have it figured out yet, and it's not going to be some sort of out of left field thing where Iger drops off the map and some random person we've never heard of before takes over the company. And that's because the Disney CEO position requires someone to be familiar with all of the aspects of this huge organization. So we will likely know years ahead of time who is going to succeed Iger, as that successor will first have to go through years of training, becoming familiar with all these different aspects of the company, during which word will get out and likely Disney will just announce it years ahead of time. There are a handful of people like Staggs and Chapek who already have this familiarization under their belt and could be quickly dropped into the CEO role, but chances of that are near zero. zero since those bridges have been previously burned. And I know that very few of us want Chapek back in that spot anyways, although Stags would be nice. Getting to this pretty juicy interview, it's not juicy in that Iger is going off or talking smack or the interviewer is grilling him or anything like that. It's pretty traditional insofar as a CNBC CEO interview goes on its face. It's the subtle word games, the body language, the whole tone of the interview that to me, I feel like it really gives us a glimpse into the current mood out in Burbank. You'll see Iger say things like, "I'm so excited about the future of the company," while looking down at his lap. And I don't mean to give him too much of a hard time. He could just be waking up. It was a very early morning interview. It was in the morning on the East Coast. And if you're wondering where this is being filmed, it's being filmed in Idaho. So he's over on the West Coast. It also looked like it was quite chilly, quite early in the morning there. Right now, Iger is at an annual conference, which is held in Idaho each year, where the world's elites, the world's billionaires, the tech CEOs, those types, they meet each year sort of as like a vacation sort of thing, but also to commiserate. At the beginning of this interview, Iger immediately starts to pass off issues Disney's facing on his predecessor, on the lockdowns of years past, on the weather, and then he goes on to say how great the parks are doing and how they're investing in them. Listen to this.
In many respects, some of these businesses are still recovering from COVID, for instance, dealing with some complexities in terms of continued disruption, as I mentioned, which we'll talk about. There are other elements of the business that I have huge optimism about. For instance, parks and resorts, which is just a tremendous business for us. We're invested significantly, but the investments we've made over the years are really paying off today. I really believe in the future of that business. We actually have opportunities there to turbocharge that growth.
So firstly, investing in the parks. Under Iger, we are seeing, at least at Walt Disney World, lower capital expenditure. What few projects are currently happening at Walt Disney World are mostly ones of necessity, where they're finishing projects that started many years ago, like the Epcot overhaul, like Chapek's promise of removing Song of the South from Splash. There are no new rides opening at Walt Disney World anytime soon, unless you consider the walkthrough attraction, the Moana attraction, a ride, or if you count the Splash Retheme as a new ride. There aren't any significant new projects greenlit right now for Walt Disney World, meaning the soonest we'll see anything of substance, any sort of big expansion at Walt Disney World, is at least the late 2020s based on the rate of construction. And that's if Disney starts ramping up expenditure right now. And it's all word games because obviously it's technically true that they are investing in the parks. There's all sorts of projects happening around the world. But what he's not saying is that it's far less than what they've invested previously. Throughout this interview, you'll notice Iger do something that a lot of CEOs do, where the things that are working, it's all to their credit. And the things that are going badly at the company, it's the weather, it's some supernatural force nobody could foresee. CNBC's David Faber asks Iger about the lackluster attendance that they are currently seeing at Walt Disney World, which the media has been reporting on a lot in recent days. And I can confirm this decrease in attendance is very real. It's also something that we knew about and talked about here on this channel 6 months ago. Disney knows far in advance what their attendance is likely to be in the future, and they saw such decreases in booking volumes for Walt Disney World in 2023 last fall that they started giving their high volume bookings people other tasks to do because they weren't seeing much volume. They were seeing a decrease in demand. That's when all of a sudden Disney started launching all sorts of room discounts for the spring, summer, fall, and so on, special deals for pass holders who in previous years Disney was actively trying to keep out of the parks on many days because they had so much demand from higher paying guests from far away who spend more money per day. We covered all that a while ago that we were starting to notice that trend, but now it's starting to manifest in the wait times at the parks, in the crowds that you're seeing at the parks. So let's see what Iger had to say about all of this and listen carefully because there's a lot of word games.
There was an article in the Wall Street Journal that seemed to indicate that people aren't going to Disney World at the rate that they did certainly a year ago. And your fight with the governor there. Is he having an impact, do you think, on attendance, his continued criticism of the company?
No, we see no sign of that at all. The article that you referred to was not accurate, actually. It was measuring attendance at Disney World on July 4th, which didn't really factor in temperature, which is about 100 degrees and 99% humidity on that day. But there are other factors as well. One is, and I think this is kind of complicated, but Florida opened up early during COVID, and created huge demand. and didn't have competition because there were a number of other places, states that were not open yet. So if you look at the numbers in Florida in 2023, or just recently, versus 2022, where not as much was open, and Florida was the only game in town, there's a lot more competition today. So against 2022, the state of Florida has been down. We actually track hotel tax revenue across the state, which is matter of public record. And there are counties in Florida that have been down 6-7% recently. We also know that our competitors are discounting in that state. So there are some near-term issues in Florida that I don't think have anything to do with politics.
And not about pricing either? Because obviously, when it comes to pricing in the parks, you have a great understanding there of what that can do.
One of the things that we addressed as soon as I came back was, whether our pricing was right or not, and whether our pricing reflected value. I should also say, I don't know when the last time you visited Disney World. I say it's where the Disney brand lives in its most sublime form. Right. I still believe that. It's an incredible experience. It's a very, very popular business and product, and it's very successful, and we're not wringing our hands over it. There's some near-term issues in Florida, as we've talked about. But
I want to talk.
And pricing is not an issue. We address some of those issues.
So you're not concerned
not.
Overall about some sort of a significant decline over time in attendance?
Not at all.
This is challenging my abilities as a reporter because holy moly, there's a lot of politicking in that clip. So first, the interviewer made a mistake. He gave Iger an out by trying to tie the DeSantis stuff into the question about attendance. DeSantis installing a new state-appointed board, one which hasn't done much of anything yet and is currently tied up in pre-trial motions, that has virtually zero relation to Disney park attendance. People booked their trips a while ago, and I doubt anyone is deciding to go or not based on whether the local district is controlled by Disney or DeSantis. So because David Faber put that into the question, Iger was able to answer this question about attendance, about lackluster attendance, in the negative. He was able to say, no, that's not a problem at all. The Wall Street Journal's reporting on poor Disney attendance is inaccurate for unspecified reasons. Then he goes into a clearly pre-rehearsed excuse about how the humidity is really high in Florida. He knew the exact temperature and humidity numbers and was trying to say that's why people didn't show up for what is normally a peak attendance day, July 4th at Walt Disney World. And of course, this excuse contradicts what he just said about attendance not being an issue and how the Wall Street Journal's reporting was wrong, because now he's making excuses for why the attendance is soft, which is exactly what the Wall Street Journal's claim was that he just refuted. So evidently there is truth to the claim that attendance is soft at Walt Disney World. And then it's just a minute of rambling about how tourism is down statewide in Florida, which is another excuse. So it clearly points to the fact that attendance is down at Walt Disney World, but he just won't say that exactly. Perhaps we'll see something about this on the next earnings report, and that's why he's being cagey about it. Between the discounts as well as the hard data on wait times as well as tax revenue from the hotels, combined with Iger's inability to answer this question, obviously there is an issue here. Disney isn't investing in any new projects despite Iger expressing interest. Maybe that'll change. I really hope it does. We know that Imagineering has a 5+ year backlog of planned and partially developed projects just waiting for funding. But here we are many months into this new Iger reign where it's nonstop talk about how the parks are doing great and how he wants to invest in the parks, and they are still not investing in the parks. And we saw something similar back in the late 2000s under Iger with that recession where the parks were much more resilient than Disney's other segments, yet we saw very, very little capital expenditure over that period. Just a wild situation. I know I've been going pretty hard on Emperor Iger in this video so far, but I do want to highlight there is a conceivable explanation where Iger could genuinely want to invest in the parks, but also not be able to very easily, and that is the monster, which is the other half of Disney's business, which is sucking up much of the cash that the parks are generating. In this interview, it is touched on how the streaming service is in massive debt, and clearly Iger is quite sensitive about this topic as it is his brainchild. He also spent an insane $71 billion on acquiring Fox, and then it turned out many of the properties they acquired, the linear networks, are losing out to cord cutting as well as a decline in ad revenue. Iger suggested they may be interested in divesting aspects of their linear linear networks business, including but not limited to Nat Geo, FX, and perhaps even ESPN. ESPN has been a thorn in Disney's side as cord cutting has hurt the business, but the ESPN Plus service I've actually heard is quite popular. So ESPN is one where I can see a path forward, where right now ESPN, because of the existing sports contracts, is forced to put a lot of the games on the linear network and they can't put them on the app. As those sports contracts come up for renewal, Disney can renegotiate them to get more of the games streamed directly on their paid app, and then eventually that may eclipse the linear part of the business and perhaps ESPN could return to the black. I could see a situation where that could happen. On the other hand, the stuff that Iger paid $71 billion for as part of the Fox acquisition, horrible decision by Iger, by the way. They have barely used what they got out of the deal, and now Iger seems to be open to selling off major components of that acquisition, which will likely sell, almost certainly sell, for less than what Disney paid for them. That huge acquisition is what accounts for a large portion of Disney's current debt burden, the maintenance of which is chewing up money that otherwise would be going towards new rides at the parks, better films. I'm no body language expert, but let me know what you guys think of Iger in this interview. It really doesn't seem like his attitude jives with the words he's saying about how we have a bright future ahead, we have so many opportunities. His attitude seems to better reflect Disney being between a rock and a hard place, one largely of his own creation, which is being blamed on things like humidity in Central Florida. Last year, the humidity brought in record crowds. Disney brought in record crowds last year. This year, it's the humidity, not Disney. It's the humidity that is starting to alienate guests and push them away from the parks. What a time to be alive. Let me know your guys' thoughts on all the latest here. Be sure to subscribe with those notifications on so you can stay up to date on all the latest news. If you'd like to support the creation of these videos, head over to mickeyviews.com/support to find out how. Thank you so much for watching. From the Mickey Views Magic Studio, this is Brayden. Have a magical day.